moving on, we have the keynote presentation of Mr. Andrew Elia. He is the Managing Director of Arishi, and he will give his keynote speech on how XR technology can power nationalization. The stage is all yours, Andrew.
Thank you very much indeed. Hello, everyone. If I can just ask my esteemed colleague to stop sharing his screen so I can share mine, then we can begin.
Right, there you go. Thank you so much, Mr. Walid, for that.
Thank you. Okay, here we go. Okay then. So, thank you very much, everyone. And as you've heard, my talk is going to be about how we can use XR technology to power nationalization. So first of all, a little bit about us. So we've been going since 2002, and we work with a number of different sizes and shapes of companies all over the world, and in a number of different verticals as well. And we've been working in the Middle East for around about 5 years. We're experts at delivering high-end software development and consulting services, and where we are the interface with the commercial and the creative arms of a business, and we help bridge all of those sort of gaps. We opened up an office in our GCC office, which is based in Abu Dhabi last year. And for those of you who have been traveling, we also exhibited at GITEX just a few weeks ago in Dubai, and we're very pleased to see how the market is returning back to life. So on the XR front, we were one of the first people to deliver augmented reality projects back in 2008. So it's been quite a few years that we've built up knowledge of that area, and we are one of the market leaders. And of course, within the umbrella of XR, we also cover other branches such as virtual reality, which I'll talk a little bit about more as well. But our focus isn't just delivering just a good-looking VR application that just stands alone. Because we deliver to a lot of enterprises and to government organisations and so on, what we deliver is a robust and integrated solution that helps deliver a seamless customer experience, and one that can be managed and run in its own right for many years to come. So we're very much believers in providing technology that is there to help enhance a business, not just now, but in the future. And just to address some of the questions that often come up when you talk about virtual reality, very often people tend to have a very sort of dismissive look if they're not familiar with it. And I think there's a lot of truths that can dispel those myths, and there's been also a lot of research as well. So what we found in deployments that we've done is that VR is very much about helping kinesthetic learning. So again, one of the misconceptions is that if you put on a VR headset, you spend most of the time staring into space and not quite necessarily engaging fully, other than just looking at a 3D version of something that you could perhaps look at on a desktop. That's not true. So in headsets that have been around for you know, even as long as 5 to 10 years, that you have the ability to have what's called 6 degrees of freedom, which means that you're not just standing in the spot, you can actually move around and physically move around in cases. And also with the way that the controllers work, you can literally reach out into that space, either with controllers or these days with even using your hands. So they can actually track your hand movements and the position of your fingers. And that sort of more tactile way of interacting actually helps enhance learning way more than a lot of people think is actually the case. And also with the way that we're now combining connectivity with XR, the ability to have one-to-one tuition without people feeling self-conscious in the classroom, or even, as we found last year with COVID, that people who couldn't get people into a seminar room to train, they can do it over VR, and we had a huge number of inquiries over that period of time. And it means that people can interact with tutors, and they can continue their learning in a way that is much more thoughtful and much more interactive than just doing a Zoom call, because let's face it, we're all sick of Zoom calls. You can use AR and VR, well, XR in any sort of learning experience, really, because it's a bit of an icebreaker. It's something where you're not just taking someone through lengthy PowerPoint presentation or sitting there talking to them on Zoom. It's something where you can step out, do some interactivity, and then step back into it, and it just breaks the ice a little bit. It helps keep the flow going, and it helps maintain people's attention. And then when you start combining it with things like quizzes and other sorts of forms of interactivity, then you start to get that real engagement between both sides, and that's where the learning really happens. And also the other aspect that you'd get with various types of distance learning anyway, but the ability to learn at your own pace and combining that with all those other features makes this a really compelling medium for helping to learn and interact and that sort of thing. But what I'm going to talk about now is some simulations which actually got touched on some of the other presentations. So this is actually what it would look like. So if we look at something like traffic flow and simulation. Now, it's all very easy to just have something that is just on a 2D screen, or even piles and piles of research and things that are basically stuck to 2 dimensions and a pile of numbers. How about having an opportunity where you can actually get in and have a look around where the traffic is flowing, and look about what sort of view does someone have from a certain vantage point, and then what happens if you decide to add another lane of traffic? What's that going to do to the noise, the view, and that sort of thing? And then give people the ability to experiment with that sort of change in the structure of a city. And again, touching on one of the points that one of the talks said, is that this need not be just restricted to the people who are planning towns and things like that. Bring in some of the citizens, get people to actually have a look at this. They might be able to suggest ideas that you haven't seen. Or more to the point, you can also use this as a way of reducing objections. So if something has been planned in a certain way and someone says, well, I think you should have a 3rd lane, or I think you should maybe route the road this way or put a roundabout here or whatever, let them go in and see why that doesn't work. So then everyone is ultimately going to be supportive of these developments because they understand them better. So it's not just the interactivity, it's not just the planning, it's the education, and it's educating citizens in a way that is visually appealing, and also in a way that helps them understand. So that 3rd dimension is pivotal to that whole process. Now, obviously, you can do that not just for traffic, but you can do it for crowd flow. You can say, what happens if you close these gates, open those gates, put different barriers in certain places, and all of these sort of things where you can literally reach out and put something in there and see what happens in real time. So all of that technology, it might sound really futuristic. It's here now, it's available now. And that is the sort of technology that we are delivering to people right now. So here's another example. So let's say you're looking at putting in some sustainable energy sources. Now, part of this will be in terms of the energy output, as you see from the battery here. But part of it is also making sure that we're not damaging the landscape too much, and putting things in a manner that's tasteful and as respectful as possible of the environment. But at a very basic level, we can say, well, look, if we were to use this much volume of this particular patch of desert, that's how much power we'll get. What happens if we put a few more in there? And that's what we're getting. So very, very simple things here. Again, it's not just about helping the planners put this stuff together. It's also about educating people to understand why you need this many, why they need to be here, and then just seeing what would happen if you take them out. So all of these simulations will use real calculations, and also one of the things we don't just develop XR, we develop AI applications. So we've developed ESG analytics solutions and things like that, and all of that stuff gets tied in to this particular technology. So as you move things around, you get real-time views of what things would be like, so you can model things accurately and visually, and everyone gets bought into that solution. One more, now we're talking about sustainability some more. So again, when we're talking about how a city is going to evolve from its current carbon emissions and basically moving towards a more sustainable, energy efficient landscape, let's model how that looks. So if we were to take something like this, where we're looking at the sort of outputs that you get across various buildings, what happens once you start changing the way some of these buildings are operating, and then seeing how that affects. So again, all of this goes into one of the real hot topics in the region at the moment, talking about sustainability and environmental social governance and things like that. And these are all the sorts of technologies where it's not just about saying, here's a pretty picture. It's the education, it's the modeling, it's the ability to give a mechanism to then move into all of your company's reporting or your government's reporting, so that you can make sure you have an accurate roadmap and how to move that process on as we progress. So moving on to professional development. So what are the other areas where you can use VR? And again, there's a common thread of education throughout all of this sort of thing. And as I've touched on before, there's been studies where people have divided a classroom into two and used half of the class learning through traditional mechanisms and others using XR technologies, and there have been proven uplifts in information retention, engagement, and basically being able to retain that sort of information and knowledge, and that can be applied across a wide variety of areas. So we've used it to help explain technology concepts to people. So artificial intelligence is something there's an awful lot of knowledge and also a lot of misinformation about, and really with something that is so pivotal to how we're using technology in the future, people need to understand it, and they need to be able to squash some of these misconceptions about the technology, because it is very, very important. Engineering, it's explaining how things are going to be built, explaining how things work, and again, in a way that you can't do with a video, that you can't do with a two-dimensional animation. You want to be able to go in and look around something and be able to see how all of those parts work. That's where XR is really, really helpful. There's some excellent concept work. We worked with a company who are now part of Apple about 10 years ago, and they used XR as a way of training automotive engineers, and they would wear the AR glasses and be able to see an overlay on what the inside of a car bonnet would look like, and it would tell them which parts of the car to disassemble in order to take certain parts out, and what type of tools you needed, and that sort of thing. It would walk them through that whole process. And that's something that you can't do on a video, because you can get in and look at areas which you can't otherwise do in 2 dimensions. Healthcare has been a really big one, not least of which we've been talking on and on about COVID, but we've been putting these sort of solutions out to healthcare trusts in various countries over the last few years. And one of the areas where we've seen this is quite interesting is that, not least of which, when you're doing clinical training and being able to have a life-size model of a person and showing where you're going to, run the line in through a laparoscopic procedure, or even just showing someone how to diagnose certain diseases. So there was a company we spoke to some months ago who developed a vital drug that helps with this anti-rejection disease called VOD. And VOD, if it's spotted early, it's very treatable with this drug. If it's not spotted early, then a patient can quickly spiral and die. So the way that they teach medics to diagnose these is usually in a seminar room with case notes that thick and that sort of thing. It wasn't practical in COVID, but it was in dire need of modernization. So being able to do that visually and being able to do it without having to worry about the logistics of having to get everyone in the same room and getting a trained physician of 15, 20 years of experience and aligning all of those things together, you can do it within XR, and these are the sort of things that save lives, and that's really critical. When we talk about banking and finance, so we've worked with banking institutions in the UAE and been helping them to understand how they need to upskill their teams in order to do that. So one of the things that again reduces that logistical overhead is being able to allow them to be trained in XR to understand certain experiences and seeing how things work day to day. And also coming back to some of the points I made in the bullet points above on this slide, it's about explaining complex subjects to people. So people who don't understand what cryptocurrency is, and cryptocurrency is a very difficult thing to explain to people. And to date, I don't think I've seen someone do it particularly well on video or with anything in 2 dimensions. So something that helps people visualize and almost interact with and conduct exercises with their hands and with movement, those are the things that get that message across, and those are the ways that you can educate current and future generations with subjects like that. So that's where we are there. Now, all of this sounds great, and it all sounds very futuristic, but as I've said before, this technology is available now. But no two XR implementations are the same, and where we differ and what we do is to help manage that whole process and make sure that when someone gets a solution, it's a solution that they can use for years to come. Now, one of the things that often ends up happening, and we've seen this with solutions that other people put in place, is that they will buy a certain number of headsets, and the developer will install the software on those devices, and then people would have to either, in order to track their learning, they would have to have some sort of login credentials where they get it, and they then have to figure out how to identify themselves, and there's a lot of overhead with doing that. And then when there's updates that need to happen, if the content needs to change, the software needs to be rebuilt, it needs to be reloaded on the headsets, and all of this stuff just becomes really complicated. Well, the good news is that it doesn't have to be quite so complicated, because what we do is we manage all the headsets centrally. We give the tools to the educators to be able to do that. We give them the ability to allocate headsets a little bit like they'd allocate a library book to someone, so they can set all that up in advance through a central interface. They give out the headsets, people do their training, it knows who they are, it knows where they are on their learning journey, and then when they're done, they hand them back in, and then the headset is reallocated online. It also means that any content updates, they will get managed centrally as well, and it gets pushed to all of the headsets, so everything is up to date. So nothing is fixed, nothing is hardwired. It's all designed to be an enterprise grade system that can be used not just now, not just next month, but for years to come, because it's designed to be a platform, not a toy. And we're firm believers in making sure that XR is a technology that will be with people for years to come. And we've seen people make mistakes with AR back in the day, where they make it very campaign centric, very unidirectional, and very expensive. And what we're looking to do, if we turn it into a medium, and we turn it into a medium that lasts, then it's going to be something that will have a benefit to people for a long time to come. So by doing that, the ability to manage training and co-workers, to manage how people are going on their learning journeys, look at their scores, see how they're attracting CPD points, and that's ultimately what we aim for in this process. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much there, Andrew. In fact, insightful presentation, of course, a lot of takeaways there. Yeah, so quite a few questions from the audience, but again, we're running late by about 10 minutes. So of course, I'm going to share that across to you. And yes, for the audience, Arishi is one of our sponsors, and really appreciate if you could take a look at the virtual space, in fact, the virtual booth, where you could see a lot in terms of their offerings. Thanks so much there, Andrew.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure.